Good morning and greetings from the mountains of North Georgia. It's the second week of September. Nice cool morning, and leaves are starting to change already. I think it's going to be a pretty autumn. Today I'd like to make a short video on how I assemble and make some of my knives and some of the tools I use. I got to have a disclaimer here that I'm not a blacksmith or a bladesmith. There's some very talented people out there that make their own blades. I kind of take the easy route here. I don't have a forge, so I purchased my knife blanks online, and there's just all kinds of people that sell knife blanks online, and we'll go a little bit over some of that information. So here's some examples of some of the knives I've made over the past few years. As you can see, there's a lot of different shapes and sizes, different materials from Damascus steel to stainless steel, and a wide range of knife scales, handles that you can use. It's easy to do, and it's kind of a fun hobby. First thing you do is pick out your knife blank, and there's a lot of different sizes and material to choose from. Then you pick out your scale, the handle that you're going to use, and there's a lot of different scales to pick from. A lot of people online that sells the scales already done, or you can make your own. Now there's lots of possibilities on the types of scales. You can get all wood and about any kind of wood there is. I recommend using a stabilized wood. You can use a raw wood as long as it dries out, that it's kiln dried or dried out really well. Stabilized wood is where they infuse resin into every pour by sticking it into a vacuum pot or a pressure pot, and that pushes or sucks the resin throughout the whole piece of wood, and it stabilizes it, so it doesn't change shape, doesn't warp or expand. And they have different, you dye it different colors, and it really comes out really pretty. I like to use stabilized wood. This is not stabilized, this is just regular kiln dried wood. It's pretty, but then you've got to use a different finish. By the way, a stabilized wood, if it's stabilized good, that polishes up really good. Once you sand it all the way down and then polish it, it really shines nice. Acrylics come in all different colors, in all different thicknesses. And your scales will be start probably anywhere from $7 up to hundreds of dollars. It depends on what type of wood or material you're using. There's stuff like bone, antler, dinosaur bone, even mammoth teeth. Those dinosaur bones and mammoth teeth get pretty expensive, hundreds and hundreds of dollars, but they're really pretty, all polished up. So there's an endless possibility of different scales that you can get. Now, something you can dial up your knife is we can use a liner. A lot of people will put a liner between the outside scale and the inside tang of the knife. And by using different colors, you can come up with different combinations. There's a blue one on this one here. Used white. You can use any of these different colors. Just dials up the knife a little bit. This is a red liner here. Talk a little bit about pins. Once you get your scales ready to go in, you want to put a pin to hold that. And there's a lot of different choices. You can go with a decorative pin. I don't know if you can see that. That's a real pretty decorative pin. That one has one too. So they come in different lengths, anywhere from 3 to 4 inches long to a foot long. And you have all kinds of different pin designs to choose from. Okay, now since we went over the different materials that we use to make a knife, let's go ahead and start. I picked out a stainless steel drop point skinner. I'm going to use some black G10 material on the front part of the knife. Some spacers. I used a white and black spacer with some green malachite spacers again, and then we're using a red dyed curly maple stabilized wood block. And then we'll epoxy those all together and epoxy it onto a white liner, and then I'll show you how we put it onto the blank. So I glued the segmented pieces and the different pieces together with super glue. Now I'm going to mix up the two-part epoxy and glue it to the back of a white liner. To spread the glue, the epoxy on the scale, we'll clamp that down on a flat part of the workbench. Now we've got it all clamped up and we'll let it set for a while. Okay, now that the epoxy is dried on our scales, we want to double check to make sure that these spacers line up properly. We don't want to be off a little bit. Okay, now it's possible to do your knife with all hand tools, but if you want to make it easy and simple, I highly recommend this type of equipment. This is a 2-inch belt sander with a disc sander on the end. What we're going to do now is trace the shape of the knife tang onto the scales. Okay, now that we've got our knife scale traced out, we're going to go ahead and cut it out on a bandsaw. Now the bandsaw is a very handy tool. Makes it a lot easier to cut these out. You could do it with by hand with a coping saw. Recommend a bandsaw. Now we've rough cut the scales. Now we can clean it up a little bit on the oscillator sander. So here's another tool that I use. It's a oscillating drum sander, and it comes in all different size drums that you can put on there. It just makes it a little bit easier to do some final shaping of your scales. Okay, now that we've got the scales pretty much roughed out, we can go ahead and glue or epoxy them onto the sides. We'll epoxy one side at a time, back drill through the holes, and then epoxy the other one on there. So we can also at this time go ahead and mark our decorative pin so we can cut the size. So when we get ready to put the pins through, we have the pins already cut. Okay, now I want to cut some pins, decorative pins to put on the knife. And I use a Dremel tool with a cutting disc. That's how we cut the pins. I'll go ahead and smear the two-part epoxy onto the scale. Make sure you wipe down everything with acetone. Clean it up really well, both the knife tang and the scale. You'll go ahead and get some clamps on there and let it set up. Okay, now that our glue is set up on the one side scale, we're going to back drill through the pinholes and then glue the other scale on. Okay, we'll go ahead and drill the front pin. There's our two pinholes. Now we'll glue the other scale on. Alright, now we've got the other side glued on, and we're going to let that set up for a while. Now we're going to back drill the front pin. we're going to go ahead and epoxy in a couple of decorative pins. Okay, I just mixed up some epoxy, and now we're going to put our decorative pins in through the handles. So we use epoxy on the pins. Make sure you wipe the pins down with acetone, clean them up good before you put epoxy on them. Okay, now we've got the scales epoxied on with the pins, decorative pins all in place. Now you can see it's pretty thick. What we got to do now is do a lot of sanding and shaping to get the handle where we want it. Okay, we're going to start shaping the handle. We're going to use the belt sander, combination belt sander, disc sander, and the oscillating sander. As you can see, it's starting to take shape. It's just a lot of sanding, a lot of shaping. We're going to use the oscillating sander to help shape the handle. We use this to help contour the handle sides. Also use a 5-inch orbital sander. Starting to take a little bit better shape here, but we've got a lot of sanding and shaping yet to do. Okay, now that we've got most of the shaping done, we can go to a finer grit of sandpaper. So what I do now is do some hand sanding. I start with 120 grit and work my way up to 1200 grit. As you can see, this is time consuming, a lot of hand sanding. Starting to take shape. A lot more sanding yet. Okay, we've gone pretty much finished hand sanding. We've gone worked our way up all the way up to about 2500 grit, and it's starting to look pretty shiny, pretty smooth. And the next step is taking it over to the buffing wheel. Okay, now we've got our sanding finished. We're going to go ahead and use the buffing wheel. Well, you can see that really shines up the stabilized maple. Really brings a pretty gloss, and the decorative pins are really nice. Brass shined up real nice. It's amazing how that wood will polish up. Okay, here's our finished knife. Polished up pretty good. The red curly maple really polished up nice. I like the green malachite stone, that turned out nice. If you liked the video, give us a thumbs up, and thank you for watching.